They hit the sand before the sky found color, boots swallowing grit, the flare cracking overhead into a false white sun that shrank to a coal, and then to smoke that crawled and lay flat, turning the grove into an aquarium of shadows. Onshore wind shouldered the fog inland and pressed it at hood height. Beyond the broken dune crest, a rutted farm track came out of the olives like a dark vein. In the sliding half-light there was movement, heavy, deliberate, too smooth for a tank. On the left flank, Lieutenant Daniel Reilly raised a hand, and the platoon's breathing split in half. He had inherited this slice of sand and scrub, barbed wire rungs half buried, sawtooth dunes scabbed with brush, one olive trunk chewed by pre-dawn shelling, and a narrow gap where the farm track squeezed through. He made that gap a gate. "Sectors," he said, calm enough for the men to pretend, and pushed Sergeant Jack Huxley's machine gun section into the damp hollow where sandbags sweated. The .30's barrel poked through a slit like a cat's eye, trained on the choke where one burst could peel a driver out if the shape became enemy. The flare burned down to a red ember, the grove to gray glass. Left, olive trunks stacked in black lines. Right, ground fell toward the beach where the sea moved like someone breathing under a sheet. Flares and star shells had painted and unpainted all night, truth shifting. Training said trust signals on top surfaces, so planes and high ground could tell you from them in a heartbeat. Down here, from a foxhole with mist sitting on brush, top didn't exist. Maria Santoro slid into the sand at Reilly's knee, handset jammed to her cheek, the rubber imprinting her skin. The net was crowded. Beach sectors yawning toward inland grids, 3 dinners served at once in a room built for one. She rolled the dial with a fingernail, chasing a sweet spot as the battery sagged and the frequency walked, voices warbling and slipping. She loved the net too much. It narrowed the world to what the box begrudged, and the box was drunk. On the track, the shadow didn't carry lights. Dust lifted from its nose and hung at chest level, lit from underneath by the dying flare, and from above by the idea of dawn. An M3 would sit high and square with the insinuation of tracks. An Italian carrier would be lower, boxier. In fog and smoke, silhouettes lied as easily as colors, and Reilly groped for the line between memory and invention. Huxley adjusted traverse like bowing a first string. Feed tray clamped, belt laid like a metal rope across sandbags. He kept one palm on the receiver, feeling for mood. 3 beat breaths in, 3 out. No spare hand for superstition. His flaw was trusting eyes over voices. Voices had gotten friends killed before. He pictured the first burst low into the roadbed to whip dust into the driver's slit, then up. He waited for someone not him to say yes. Reilly counted heartbeats. Onshore wind pushed fog into their faces, making hood markings a smear. Any topside recognition strip, a yellow brushstroke they'd been told about, would be 5 feet up in a white world. If this was an M3, their resupply was already rolling this track from beach dumps where quartermasters drowned in crates. A trigger squeeze could collapse the day. Net to battalion, Maria breathed past him into the set. Left platoon, left flank, break, possible vehicle farm track, no lamps, range 90. The radio cracked joints and chunked back some other platoon, insisting on fire at a stone farmhouse. Map references were shifting, codes changing to inland boxes faster than pencils, so the world men described didn't line up with theirs. She tapped the battery case, a lover's plea. Stay. The shape slid forward. Track whispered under it, rubber on stone, worn to skin by centuries of carts. Under the hush the mist put on anything beyond 10 yards. An M3 steers with wheels and drives from rear sprockets, a talk you learn. Reilly couldn't hear it. He could hear caution. Caution was human whichever patch you wore. Huxley nudged elevation a hair. The belt paid out a half-inch with a sound like coins poured into a palm. His A-gunner, apple-cheeked, had the second belt coiled, brass dull in fog. Sand had kissed the feed tray early, wrong ribs grit-smeared when they humped it over the dune. Huxley could feel the gun's potential to sulk. He slapped the receiver's side, ritual and drill, telling the machine and himself they had to make a pact. Reilly set his silhouette against the torn olive, finger on the guard, not the trigger, someone being last to choose. He'd been taught to fire when doubt remained. Hesitating killed men whose names he knew. But some chains weren't bullets and beans. Firing now could cut off his own resupply. The gap could be a story with a short end. The radio spat a thin thread. Left track, bring ridge, then static and a new voice yelling grids that didn't fit their map. When batteries droop, the SCR 300 drifts, and stations become ghosts that talk to the wrong rooms. She adjusted the dial a hair, rubber complaining, chasing the call like an animal into a narrowing corridor. 50 yards, headlamps dead, no horn, trying not to be seen. Italians might creep like this into a beachhead. So would a friendly half-track pushing ammo under orders painted faster than they dried. Reilly had caught a rumor, a dawn improvisation, paint a yellow strip for recognition, stencils be damned. Improvisation makes and unmakes men. Inland, a stone farmhouse held its darkness, perfect for a rifleman who wanted to remind Americans they weren't wanted. Harassing fire murmured now and then, distant cracks spooking sand, and each lazy shot shaved a second off how long anyone would give a shadow. Huxley listened to brick settle like the house had cleared its throat. Dust hung at knee height, thrown up by the vehicle's slow roll and pushed inland by wind, sitting exactly where a rifleman would aim to set a guilt trap. Smoke lived at hood level, gauze over lines. So the place for the yellow strip, roof, hood, was blank to men in holes. Down here you saw flank and track and a side of a face. Top was Doctrine for someone else. The belt chattered without the gun, brass snicking as the A-gunner fed slack. The gun inhaled and hesitated, a catch in the throat. Huxley smacked the feed cover, belt teeth and links aligning like a stubborn zipper. The slap cost him a quarter second away from the slit. A quarter second is where somebody's life lives. Salt and brass on Reilly's tongue. He drew a line from farmhouse to track and saw trouble's geometry. Fire now on a friend and the house answers. Track becomes crossfire, their gate a shooting gallery with U.S. men in wrong stalls. Wait on a hostile and armor could nose through and use dunes to get behind his flank, chessmen walking off the board. His finger twitched at the idea of any future. The flare's smoke unwound and mist thickened. The shadow grew for a heartbeat as side plate found a pocket of clear. Fresh paint in half light looks wet even when dry. Something low along that plate was slicker than the rest, a thin horizontal line at knee height. If yellow, if not invention, the world might pivot. From this angle, he only knew difference existed. Maria's knuckles went white. Overlapping nets ran over her. "Say again," she said low. "Identify. Send grid." The reply was a threadbare blanket, a call sign she half recognized, a grid that belonged behind them, and right, not inland and left. Between beach and grove, references had shifted. The voice spoke from a world not switched yet. Reilly read her pencil, and in the pinch of her mouth, doubt. Training paraded. If the mark isn't where Doctrine says, if radio puts the vehicle outside the frame you need, if the era has taught anything, it's that hesitation can be murder. But someone had ordered paint on anything that rolled, and men with brushes put paint where hands could reach, not where Doctrine pointed in the dark. The engine idled in an uneven cough, like a man deciding to speak. The stall sent a butterfly of panic through the grove. The far birds lifted and resettled, and U.S. men in holes held breaths until someone else taught oxygen how to move. Huxley clicked a rear sight and waited to find out what his hands were. Inland, a knuckle crack of the morning's first casual shot. It smacked dirt by the track and peppered the vehicle's tire, a pinwheeling complaint underscoring the cough. Reilly felt the world tilt toward irreversible, always the moment before first rounds, make new facts. It cost one more second. Sometimes 1 second rewrites orders. Maria pinned a voice so thin she had to lean her whole body to hear it. Ammo. Half. Track, as if convincing itself. A call sign like a name across weather, familiar and wrong on its grid. The frequency slid under her, the battery sagging. Grid 2-3. No. Beach code. Raven. Green. Words piled up like men at a fence gap. Arithmetic sprinted past the pencil, a vehicle claiming friendly, with a stripe maybe the right color in the wrong place, talking from the wrong grid because the ground itself had just been renamed. He'd been told to fire if doubt remained. Doubt here had multiplied. Hold, he said, to men, to gun, to morning, because breath was cheaper than a life until it wasn't. The hood plane stayed a white slab pushed by wind. Only the flank offered that slick flash. Take the shot based on everything else and ignore that, and he'd be right according to paper and wrong according to paint. North Africa had taught him the price of wrong according to paint. His finger coiled a trade he might not make. Reilly set weight backward to say the word that let Huxley do his work. The olive creaked. The sea breathed. The farmhouse chambered a thought. Maria tried to grab a call sign before it slipped through. "Say the code again," she hissed, as if numbers could pull roads into place. Under the idle, the vehicle blipped, decision tasted, swallowed. The engine steadied. The driver probably slapped a dashboard or muttered, "We're wrong," and waited for a signal he couldn't see. Onshore wind pressed fog right where right answers stayed hidden and wrong answers waved. Deeper into the grove, something moved, not metal. Shadow cross-hatching on shadow, maybe a patrol glad for tunnel vision. Reilly filed it under later and knew later was optional. The gate was his job. The rest could shout. The radio almost cleared its throat. Maria caught a call sign that matched their midnight manifest, assigned to bring 30 belts and grenades before dawn, erased advantage. The voice offered a grid with 1 foot in yesterday, elbow in today, letters and numbers mismatched. Left track at the Olives, resupply. Then spider silk for signal. Fire now drags chained consequences. Dead ammo carrier, flayed driver, a day hungry for rounds while a farmhouse smiles into its rifle. Hold and the wolf might be inside the sheep before sun stops hiding. 30 men's breaths pressed against his. The sky chewed the black. Olives agreed it might be morning. The 30 belt sighed forward. Huxley's eye and rear sight were one. His A-gunner, reading angles, readied the second belt, grip saying he'd wear whatever came like a bad coat. Metal on branch in the grove, then nothing. The engine held and let out an idle you could count. Dust hung low, making the side world crisp while the top stayed cloud. Huxley wanted color to tell him what to do. The side strip threw back light like bare steel never would. He thought yellow, then scolded himself for thinking without a sight picture and a word. Maria lifted long enough to throw Reilly a look, apology and plea. "He says he's ours," she said, voice swallowed by wind, "but he's talking from the wrong grid." The set agreed by not helping. The battery winked tiredly. She adjusted and felt the frequency want to be wrong. She held it anyway. Reilly didn't answer her. He watched track, house, men. He was down to a second that belonged to him. Training pushed and instinct held. Between both, a thin voice on a dying battery and a fresh stripe catching a morning that didn't exist yet. A loose stone rolled under the tire and rattled until it found quiet. The unknown lurched like a horse checking a bit. Huxley's finger made air hard. Behind the house, a second shooter remembered his job. The engine thrummed courage or lack of choice. Inside, men might be waiting for the strip to buy them parole. From here, the proper roof was empty. Only the side kept offering stubborn difference, tempting him to accept a wrong axis as the right argument. Maria pushed the handset harder, reshaping her ear. She'd burned the last grace in the battery chasing a net with 3 layers of men who all had truths. "Resupply, say last," and the set answered with a hiss that buried a syllable. Every second here was a second she could have been with battalion asking for orders that would be late. Reilly slid toward the gun nest, small enough not to commit, big enough for Huxley to feel him. He imagined chopping his hand and the burst ripping morning to ribbons. He imagined holding and the stones counting their age. His mouth opened. The word wasn't born. Then, above idle and lazy threats and wind, the radio found a sliver. Ammo, half-track inbound for left gap. Bone thin, thread strong. Request green light. Position. Grid. The numbers were wrong to their map. In the slit, 2 eyes blinked slow. If a decision wasn't made this breath, morning would make it for him. "Wrong grid," Maria whispered. The shape idled like a clock not theirs. Huxley took up slack. The farmhouse lined its second shot. The battery needle sagged one last notch. The shape stalled, engine coughing into a steady idle, and across warbled static a faint voice called itself friendly from a grid their map didn't know. Reilly lifted his hand. Air seemed nailed still, branches pausing, breath arrested by instincts older than radios. The call sign belonged to a supply run scheduled for beach grid, not this inland track. Sector boundaries had shifted from letters to squares after midnight, a mismatch that jabbed like a thorn. He lowered his chin, sighted a long barrel shadow toward the dark rectangle, and felt training's old hand press. If doubt, fire first. Maria crouched deeper in the scoop dune, hand set tight, thumb steady on the key despite the tremor. "Say again, call sign and grid," she said, flat, eyes slotted toward the shape, because even radio operators learn the dark. The reply came ragged, numbers smearing as voltage drooped and coils wandered. She turned the dial by feel and bared her teeth at static, knowing catching one voice made others bleed through. The engine coughed and settled, a throaty idle smothered by dew. Inside, the driver feathered the clutch. Courtesy anywhere else, confession here. Huxley's clean rake had the approach. He leaned in, fingers stiffening, and his eye found only the long hood slope where a bright strip should have glowed under flare wash. He trusted what he saw, and what he saw was a blank top, a roofline like a closed eye, no topside paint shouting friendly at ground level. On another frequency, beach units called surf, a mislanded company complained. A battery asked new grids because old ones rolled with every yard inland. Maria heard a duplicate call sign 2 octaves down, crosstalk braiding 2 reports. Authentication could be a mile and 5 minutes off. The voice in her ear was losing frequency and nerve. Reilly held a square of the world in his head, the track a rifle barrel aimed at sea. Stones on either side were low enough to vault, high enough to hide a prone man with a grenade. Brine and grit on his tongue. Wait and risk an armored car nosing the dunes. Shoot and blow apart resupply. Move and lose the choke. He tilted his head, listening for engine cadence. An M3's cough has a stride runner rhythm. He couldn't swear to it. Huxley slapped the gun mount twice, a ritual to stack seconds. He tightened the belt, drew a breath meant to spend through a trigger. The feed tray coughed. Sand everywhere now inside like a bad idea. The belt jerked, receiver snatched, metal said no. He blinked, drilled, palm strike, sweep tray, blow grit, reseat, curse the ocean. He flashed 2 fingers, primary jammed, and slithered to the secondary. A backup gun with a less forgiving angle, a tuft of scrub cutting the field. The migration cost him the one line that might have shown the hood. From here, he had a profile of shadow on shadow. He set the butt, tasted metal, and refused to fire blind. Maria watched the battery indicator in her mind because the set had none, only the feeling of a voice falling. "Authenticate," she snapped, feeding the half-cracked code taught before dawn. The return was right letters, wrong order, a stutter that could be fear or a loose wire. She glanced at Reilly. He didn't move. That was movement enough. Try again, by seconds. A flare groaned to the east, fat white under haze. Its light spilled sideways through smoke into a red coal above treeline, the grove an aquarium of shadows. Dirt at knee-height became layers, mist, dust, breath. Above hood line went flat as slate. The physics did what the enemy couldn't, erased the place you'd marked to be seen. He felt men behind him becoming outlines, each smudge a rifle and a kitchen saying their names far from danger. Stateside, an instructor's voice like a punch. Top markings for air and high ground. If you can't see it from your belly, it may not be for you. He'd promised himself caution on the first night ashore. Nerves and misreads would be the day's weather. But here was the knife-width decision. Trust the absence of a thing or the possibility it had moved. The vehicle edged half a wheel. Gravel ticked under tread. Russo, hands at 10 and 2 to feel like driving instead of navigating men, had been told hours ago to paint a yellow strip with whatever paint they could find. A supply sergeant with a clipboard and a flashlight had said it, voice jammed with coffee and urgency. Russo climbed the side plate in the dark and pulled one stroke he hoped looked like certainty. He put it where he could reach. The track drifted right a fraction, turning one plane into another. Under the flare's residual light and ground fog, a color cut through like a recalled song. Knee-high, wet-looking though dry, the right yellow at the wrong place, running straight the length of the side plate. Bright as truth and wrong by doctrine. Huxley's cheek pressed wood. In his mental file of colors, shell cases, cigarette packs, kerosene tins, this matched. The animal in him relaxed a valve. His hands refused to move inside the trigger guard. He'd also been told where to expect it. This wasn't that. The dissonance kept him cold inches from action. Maria saw it too, a banner at boot height, and couldn't help the thought, who paints for the sea at ankles? She made her voice a narrow bridge and asked Root from the beach dump. The answer staggered back. Place names you could only find if you'd walked past the stone well and turned right where an olive overhangs a fence. The enemy wouldn't know those. She stored that, cautious belief, tasting like chalk. Reilly squinted to make color pop from black. He'd learned that in desert light. He let the dull nose stencil under salt and grease assemble, a U.S. that could be mud or hope, and a tightness in him loosened. Almost wasn't enough, not with that house staring. Tracer stitched from the farmhouse, vivid beads pulling a thread through dust and road metal like teeth. Instinct pulled everything tight. The half-track brake squealed, nose dipped, rear swayed into track edge. Rifles tensed into commas. The next burst would decide height and flesh. Huxley almost answered the house out of reflex. He held fire. Lighting up would announce them louder than flares. He hunted for the slit and muzzle flash. Found only a darker dark. The backup ran clean, ready, but the field of fire was wrong for answers that wouldn't become confession. Maria heard battalion force the grid pivot. Old sectors retired like ship names, new squares handed out. It explained wrong coordinates, fixed nothing about time. The battery was going, the handset warmed and cooled between words. She wanted to wave arms faster than radio. Instead, she made the call real. "Hold," she mouthed anyway, language that still carries. Russo's eyes swallowed horizon inside the slit. He couldn't see men, only the hedge of silence that felt like skin pressure. Heel on brake, brain on night before, brush too broad for neat work, a sergeant saying yellow and vanishing. He imagined his shape from their side, a dark rectangle with a voice that couldn't climb, a paint strip like rumor. The wheel was slick with sweat. Reilly inhaled and let it burn a path to decision. Enemy tracer, vehicle braking, paint correct but mislaid, radio claiming friendly from a misaligned square. He dropped his carbine muzzle a fraction, the smallest public thought he could afford. Training clapped his shoulder. Wrong surface equals wrong ID. The urge to fire bloomed. The onshore wind dragged smoke low across hood height, turning everything above mid-chest into blank frames. Under it, the side panels stayed bright. Physics tried to tell him that what you can see from your belly is your world. The paradox gnawed. Proof sat where it shouldn't, making it taste like a trick. Huxley couldn't abide watching himself freeze. He prepared the act he might not commit. Angle a breath, align on the farmhouse, set the belt, count cadence, hold burst tight. He studied the half-track for human wrongness in movement. He saw only caution. Anything alive is cautious. "Say route," Maria ordered, clipped rhythm. The reply, "Past dunes, left at the stone well, right under the olive." The cadence of a man who'd walked it, not an enemy improvising. Reilly swallowed. He could accept wrong grid in a shift and drift in dying batteries, accept a brush put markings where hands reached. Accepting a moved signal of safety demanded trust that got people killed. He thought of faces up and down his line, bodies turned to geometry under fire. Something clicked behind his sternum. Resolve, not grace. A new tracer stuttered high, stitching sky, like the house had seen more moving in the grove than the track alone. The half-track flinched, headlights blacked out, reflecting dew off grill. The lower arc of a white star ghosted through grime. The mist tried to erase it. Once he knew where to look, it stayed. Huxley whispered his cadence, the way you put punctuation on bullets. He could probably make the shooter eat dust now, maybe worse. The lure was clean. The risk was math. Light up, draw more teeth, throw ricochet toward the track. He waited, the inaction almost a tremor. On the track, Rousseau did the smart, stupid thing, eased forward to show another plane. The left fender sliced fog and flashed a stub of star curve under grime. Not swearing proof, but enough to hit ribs. He felt the vehicle flip like a coin. He begged gravity. Relief tremored. The farmhouse was still counting. He needed to decide if wrong surface color was a bridge or bait. No new flare would save him. He put weight on his front knee, leaned into what he was about to own. Maria's handset died like a bird against glass, a small sound, then blank. She held dead weight to her ear because letting go would be loud. Without net, eyes, ears, and the grammar of bodies were back in charge. She looked straight at the track, the primitive authentication. She didn't apologize for it. Huxley shifted. Tiny crunch. Done waiting in a way that felt like a train arriving, he asked himself his last question. If I were the enemy, would I inch into a kill zone without lights and brake when tracer dust hit my tire? He answered with the one he could live with. He tilted his barrel 2 degrees at the farmhouse instead of the track. Reilly started to say, "Hold one more heartbeat," when the inland window vomited light, lower and hotter, chewing track edge, chips coming at them like bees. The half-track rocked, panicked. A shape in the rear moved, someone reaching. In the same breath, the world sharpened to points. Strip right, hoop blank, farmhouse decided. His second balanced and tilted. He slid his finger inside the guard without touching off. In the new sum, a stray factor, a red flick of a jeep's tail in the grove, a smear where there should be none if this lane belonged to the enemy. Dust ate it, but it had existed. His breath stopped and restarted as choice. He lowered his carbine a hair, enough to tell men watching his silhouette the needle had shifted. Huxley cursed into teeth. The farmhouse sent another angry line. The half-track stamped its brake and ducked into stone shelter, out of view like a fish under a dock. Gone from sight is the worst missing. Movement invites bullets. Reilly held a palm to freeze the line while the inland window spat again, lower still. The engine coughed, keyed. He exhaled, color confirmed in the wrong place, training snarling, the choice's hand closing on his. The fog lapped like inland sea, flattening edges, dissolving distance. The half-track inched with a wet cough too human to be a threat. The yellow strip burned knee-high, bright and wrong, like a flag hung backward. Manuals drilled top surfaces. The beachhead was drift and crosstalk and brush orders. He moved his finger close to metal's notch like a bead, counting seconds, forcing breath as the shape crept. Maria's cheek welded to rubber, headset full of ghosts. "Say again," she hissed. The reply smeared neither beach sector nor New Inland. It sat in the crease where someone had folded the map. She pinched the knob, hunted where squeal softened, got another net yawning. Stretchers, artillery adjust, everything at once, none of it anchoring steel. She glanced over the handset at the yellow strip and felt battery sag. The longer she held transmit, the more the set wandered. Huxley's spare gun nested low behind sand tamped by boots and rifle butts, barrel just clearing crest. Belt rekindled, running, 2 fingers smoothing it. The angle was worse, side, not roof, and haze hung exactly where a hood mark would shine if it existed. He spat left, tracked sights across track, ribs rising and falling under webbing like a held horse. He trusted eyes. Eyes said color was right and placement the sin of a rushed brush. He shifted left and loaded shoulders for recoil. The farmhouse loomed blacker, windows ideas of rectangles. Earlier shots had started there, the mean kind that pricks and waits. Now something ticked, metal on stone, barrel shifting. Reilly wanted mortar, no tubes. Smoke, the smoke already there choked. The house was looking, and the next tracer would find flesh. Angry gunners are predictable. Baker, too, he whispered toward the pit behind the dune crest. Smoke. 2. Staggered. The tube angled its throat. Maria tried to warn Russo. Smoke inbound, wait my mark. But the battery blush was match thin. Tone wavered like a drunk in a door. 2 stub blooms coughed into chalk mid-track, slow sighs the wind mothered inland. It wasn't a curtain, it was a dragging veil. It smeared the farmhouse's sight lines and held the side plates in a milky frame. The yellow band glowed like a bandage in gauze, answer and accusation both. Through the slit, Russo watched a world narrow. Maria's voice ghosted his lap. Her firmness told him she was afraid of him. He eased off the brake and felt calf shake, lowered until the tremor quit. He remembered paint stink, a cigarette stub lighting a label, a brush snapping hairs on rusty metal. "Put it where the boys'll see it," the sergeant had said. The hood was straps and dents and gear. The side was a chest-high canvas. He cursed the compromise. Huxley took what the smoke gave. He raked not at the slit. Wasting rounds on stone is for poets, but low ricochets walking up like tracer, slapping a cheek with dust. Orange tracers dulled by haze, white dust jumping. The house's fire stuttered. The belt fed smooth. Rhythm he could keep if the barrel let him. Reilly slid low along the berm beside Maria, shoulder brushing coiled wire. "He's ours," he said, barely sound, "and he's in our lane." He said it like stepping onto ice. He knew leaflets with stark diagrams, top for high eyes, side for column on roads. A farm track under an olive canopy was neither road nor field. Orders were written by men moving crates at 3 a.m. He lifted his chin, peered at stone where the truck crouched, and risked his name on wrong paint right. "Hold unless fired upon," he said louder. "If that truck moves, it's ours. Italian gray, you call it. That strip's ours. That strip is ours." He said it like a prayer until it sounded like orders, and in the saying moved Huck's suspicion an inch. Through the handheld scope, Maria saw smoke-wrapped movement, not a clean roll, a nervous creep. "On my go, short hop to the wall, past the gap, then full, hull down," she keyed. Uncertainty kills. Orders keep hands busy. Her voice belonged to the morning. The farmhouse answered dust with spite. Knees-high granules danced along track edge, rain on tin. A tracer flicked a pebble up. Even that felt personal. Reilly tapped Baker 2 for the last smoke and spent it, trading his own eyes for the truck's chance. Russo breathed. 1-2, and let go. The M3 rolled like a dog sniffing, curious, then committed. Front tires eased into where Tracer had stitched. Soft hands kept fear from the wheel. Overcorrections rolled trucks and reputations. Under grime, he trusted the star, believed he could put proof where a gun could read it. Huxley listened to the engine's key change, chorus approaching. He blessed and cursed it. Choice had been made. Rightness still unknown. He stopped giving the farmhouse hate to keep a clean lane, let smoke earn its keep, and in pause heard other guns along the beach, other men making other bets. Reilly rose to a knee and chopped his hand twice. Go, go, human gesture to iron animal. It mattered whether Russo could see through slit and mist. Someone always sees, even if it's only the part that wants to live and looks for permission. The half-track nosed past broken wall, showed hood to low ground. Smoke trailed edges, light-licked top. Briefly, perfectly, a stenciled star winked through filth. Flares had lied all night, colors shifted under smoke. This wasn't flare, this was morning lifting sheet. The line held, fingers hovered. Inside the farmhouse someone cursed, syllables thick. A gun barked high and late, round streaking waist above hull. Huxley held. The duel wasn't the point, a truck with belts was. War loves men to forget that. The half-track lurched onto firm earth inside the gap, shocks grunting. The weight of boxes thunked into Reilly's ears. He stepped into open because sometimes you need to be shot at to stop your men from shooting. Flat palm forward. Stop. Here. Russo stomped. The M3 squatted. In the still, he heard his own breath louder than engine. He killed a nothing and kept idle low. Through slit he found Reilly, a man whose shoulders told you where morning went. They were going to live. He downgraded that bravery. They were going to live if wood and stone kept promises. Maria kept the handset and exhaled an inch. She stamped their position onto numbers battalion could use. The reply carried relief. Upstairs needed to pretend maps held. Huxley scrambled back to the primary. He wiped his palm and let sand smear skin, not feed tray. He reseated cover, checked belt, worked the charging handle, angled at the slit in case Spite had one last shot. Reilly moved toward the cab and the man inside to put flesh and voice on the line. The farmhouse ran dry. Click not heard, but fire ceased. A shape leaned in the window. Reload or run. Huxley could stitch it and call it prudence. He held a second, measured risk against day sliding in like a tide. Russo twisted his head sideways and called, "Ammo for Baker 2 and Huxley's team." Naming parties makes machines human. A hand tapped his fender twice, the universal knock of shared work. They got to it, as men do, once fear stops giving speeches. They peeled crates, passed belts, tugged straps snagged on a jag of the world. Hands move faster when guessing stops. The radio kept time, beachmaster threatening to dump backlog, a medic requesting a cart, farther down someone. Armored cars on the road. A new problem not for this exact second. Every new fact tried to colonize their seconds. Reilly drew a small border and patrolled it with his eyes. Maria listened and pruned. She cut chatter and filtered for the net that would tell her if the farmhouse meant to upgrade from harassment. She got an MP arguing with a supply sergeant about who authorized paint in the dark. The sergeant's defiance, done is done, dragged a brush across her imagination. Authority hides in daylight and comes out in misfortune. She filed it for later. War remembers its petty sins. First light tightened screws on the lens. Mist lifted, olive undersides flashed. The M3's hood stopped being idea and became metal. The star took shape. A man who would shoot now declared himself. Discipline hardens around that. Reilly let the star anchor. Huxley let it quiet the itch. Maria let a line ease out of her brow. Behind the farmhouse, an engine coughed, resolved into wheels on ruts. Distance measured in options. Armored cars? Maybe not yet. Maybe truck, maybe motorcycle, maybe a probe. Reilly counted men, checked Huck's barrel wasn't cooking. Mortar sighted for inland arcs. Maria's pack with minutes left. He thought of grid shifts and misread squares making friends into targets and made an unkeepable promise. Not today. Russo, job done, sat a beat. The vehicle under him panted like a beast. Next minutes belonged to the same crossroads. Back to dump, forward into line, or hide. He looked at Reilly already looking inland and understood answer without words. He felt tender toward that understanding, then ashamed, then fine. Men who live can like each other. A shadow detached from the farmhouse, 2 helmets, dragging a box. Huxley called it, asked permission with the same breath. Reilly shook no. The box moved away, in the only direction he preferred enemy ammunition to move. He memorized the path. Maria caught a clean burst. Half tracks will use panels on top. Repeat, top only. Prim, certain, late. She looked at the M3 and its right-wrong strip. Not wrong now, not in this angle, not with smoke cooperating. She keyed, affirmative, agreeing while changing nothing. Reilly rapped the side with knuckles, not anger, to draw eyes. When you go back, pitch to carry enough, and not more. Find a brush, put that stripe where quartermasters intended. As close to an admission as he'd give that the wrong thing saved them. Russo nodded like a man taught aright. There is no doctrine for gratitude, only practice. Light went pale yellow and made sweat visible. Olive leaves glittered like wet coins. Bugs woke and wrote unreadable news. The inland engine grew, faded, returned, stuttering commitment. Huxley wiped his forearm and left a mud streak under his brim. "They'll test the line," he said, low. Men shifted boots to stances they could hold. They moved the last ammo into holes where fingers could find without looking. Mortar crew laid bubble. Maria tested transmit. The battery held, a small miracle born of restraint and luck. She considered swapping to the spare, then decided to ride this one until it died under her. Changing anything invites notice. Russo reached under bench for the paint can, felt waxed paper slick. No time. He set it on the seat where his thigh could feel weight, breathed air that smelled of salt, copper, and solvent. He tapped the dash twice like everybody does, ground the gear into forward, and shouldered the track into its own dust, treads riding over their history to make it deeper. The farmhouse door opened. A figure stepped out, white cloth on a stick, only to pull it fast and wipe his face. Mimed surrender recast as hygiene. Huxley snorted, found real things. Reilly watched for movement that meant more than gesture. Far down the beach, a cheer rose and fell, distance pinching it into gulls. He checked his watch and found it useless. Time here wasn't minutes, it was movements. He pointed 2 fingers toward the inland track, recon by listening, not legs. He told Maria, "Get me battalion, tell them our lane is green and hungry. More belts, more tubes." Hunger is easier to admit after eating. The half-track idled a beat longer than needed. Russo held it so he could listen, for a wait, for a gunshot veto. He heard only the arithmetic of angles done with bodies. He eased forward. The machine leaned toward the beach, toward where they refilled things that drew lines and smoke. He pulled out. As he did, the hood tilted into light that made the stars sing, then dulled again into private truth. The side strip caught one last sip of yellow and turned it to honey, then went to work blending into grime. Somewhere, a sergeant would catch heat and pass it on, and brushstrokes would become policy in the only way they do out here. Men finishing thoughts someone else started. First light raised mist enough to show true surfaces. Hood star stared unblinking. Side strip looked shy. Rousseau turned and shouldered into his dust. At the gap, a rifleman's corporal crouched with a strip of cloth and a stolen brush tucked into his helmet band. As the M3 rolled, he dragged bristles in a neat stroke across metal above the hood. Paint kissed the proper plane, a small correction greeting the morning. He wiped excess on his trouser leg without ceremony. Behind him, in white, the wind carried inland, the wrong strip dulled, a fading lesson in where not to look next time. The half-track hummed away, gathering its shadow. The platoon sank into the shallow crouch of men, expecting new questions. The farmhouse held breath. The grove sorted light from leaves. The beach kept pushing air into the world. The inland engine throbbed once more, closer now, and Huxley slid the .30 a thumb's width to new cover while Reilly raised 2 fingers, then swung them right, deciding where to meet it as the paint on the hood warmed under the first hard sun.